Hey, welcome back to another episode of the DVO Show. I am with my good friend DJ Padjen. How you doing, DJ?
I'm good. How are you?
Awesome. So, DJ, you work at a recovery clinic in Murray.
Yep.
Recovery Ways, is that correct?
Correct.
And you're also a Red Sox fan.
Yeah.
And they just won the World Series.
They did. I was jumping through the roof.
I saw that your wife put it on social media that you were.
I was a little
pretty
anxious and nervous, and we haven't had many of those over the course of their history. So when they win, it's a special thing.
So you were pretty stoked about it.
I was.
Awesome. How did you become a Red Sox fan?
Well, in Utah, growing up in Utah, we don't have professional sports other than the Jazz and now Real Salt Lake. So. Looking and just being a fan of sports and watching, I always root for the underdog.
Okay.
So it's kind of a blessing because we get to pick the teams. I didn't want to pick the closest one to us like the Broncos or the prevalent 49ers fans and stuff. So with baseball, I grew up watching the Braves on TBS. When we were younger.
Oh yeah.
It was there, and then followed over to the Red Sox, and the Red Sox were unfortunate through so many incidents up till they won in I believe it was 2004. And I followed them prior to that and just rooting for them, but they were always the underdog and always lost, so it was fun to follow them the whole way.
Now, we've known each other since we were like 13, 14 years old, and they might not know you're a pretty damn good baseball player back in your days.
I still play some softball too, so
nice.
I haven't gave up the dream yet.
That's good. So let's talk about Recovery Ways a little bit.
Sure.
So it's just a place where people can go when they've... Well, I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, sure. So people have probably seen in the media, they know people, they've heard of people who know people. Addiction and mental health issues are very prevalent in today's day and age.
And now, especially, you tell me, now that the weather's changing and we're getting to that fall, winter season, there's kind of less sun.
Yeah.
Do you notice that affected too?
Yeah, it can. There's actually a diagnosis that has seasonal affective disorder when people go, with lower temperature climates and more dreary stuff, like it can actually affect someone's mood. So, but addiction and mental health a lot of times coincide, and people have addiction issues not because of a moral failing, not because of lack of willpower. It's their way of coping with the issues that they feel.
Okay.
And no one's going to lie and say that those substances that they use aren't an effective coping skill for a while, but then what happens is that creates a mountain of issues too, whether it's legal, medical, relationship issues, things like that. So there they now have a couple of issues that they have to deal with, as opposed to just some of the stuff they were trying to cover up before. So it's very prevalent. You're seeing news flashes day in and day out about the opiate epidemic and things like that. So at Recovery Ways, we do it's called a continuum of care. So it's medical detox, it's residential treatment, and then a step down program thereafter.
Okay.
And because it's so prevalent, people need help. And I think the media and people are starting to learn and understand. And part of my goal here is to help educate people. We all know someone who struggled with this, and I can't tell you how many times that when we're talking with someone, a family member, spouse, things like that they're like, I just wish they would stop doing that, or I can control it pretty easily, why can't they? So they kind of look at it as, like I said, a moral failing or lack of willpower. And
easier said than done, right?
Yeah, and for the people that can do that, that's great, but there's a subset of people who can't. They need help. So treatment and the treatment industry is very prevalent in the United States. There's a lot of different options out there.
Okay.
But the aim for treatment is to help people move off of the substances that they're abusing as a coping skill and learn healthier ways to cope.
Okay.
Maybe they didn't have the manual that their neighbor has for dealing with issues, and just kind of walking through life with purpose and value and things like that. They've gotten off track and they just need to be retaught how to learn that. And that can happen through therapeutic intervention, medical intervention, psychiatric intervention. There's community self-help groups out there that people don't know about. Salt Lake has a very amazing recovery community. We're very blessed to have that here. There's a lot of people in long-term recovery, and they find that community support. It's almost like a pseudo family. You have your family that loves and supports you, but they just don't quite know or can't relate to how you're feeling or how you're thinking about a particular issue or how it affects you. But then you have people that you've connected with that have struggled like you have, and they've overcome or they've walked through that before, so they can almost be mentors that way. So.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay. How did you connect to, because there is a lot of options, how did you connect to Recovery Ways?
Yeah, so to go back a little bit, I'm in long-term recovery. I struggled with substance abuse since, as far back as I can remember. I wouldn't call it that when I was, binge drinking and partying in high school and things like that. But in hindsight, it was an issue back then. I was that guy that would always drink to excess or want more, So, but it wasn't that big of an issue. I was able to complete school and go on to college and get my undergrad and stuff. But right around that time, I started noticing I was a little bit more depressed. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. My relationships weren't that strong. But, we do what we do in college, which is drink, and or at least for a lot of people. And that made me feel comfortable. And it made me feel comfortable with the new social settings and things like that. So it escalated and became an issue, but I didn't want to see it that way. It wasn't creating a ton of consequences in my life, so I kind of, just trudged forward. But I felt different, and alcohol helped with that, but it wasn't a solution, right? It wasn't a long-term solution. So, as time progressed and things, kind of grew outside of my control, I just didn't recognize the problem for what it was.
Got it.
Right around 2003, I had the opportunity at a party, someone offered me OxyContin, which, again, with the opiate epidemic and things, this was preceding all of that. I wanted to try it for some reason. Never was big on prescription or illicit drugs or things like that. I just wanted to drink and have a good time.
You were more into alcohol then?
Yeah, at the time. And I can't tell you why, I wanted to try that or what was going through my head. The hard thing is the foresight of what that was to bring into my life wasn't there, right? It was innocent. It was, hey,
have fun.
Yeah, exactly, right. Well,
everyone else was doing it.
Yeah, correct. So, I tried it, and that did something for me that alcohol couldn't do, and it changed how I felt in the moment, but it kicked something off in me that wasn't there before, and that was, how do I feel this way every day, all day? Why haven't I felt this way my whole life?
Euphoria.
Where can I get more of it? So that led me down a path to, just really negative choices and putting me in a position to be a statistic. And, you hear, again, on the news, I keep hammering on this because it's so prevalent, but, people move from prescription opiates to heroin.
Yes.
That was part of my story. I had burned every opportunity and every relationship there was, and that led me to what happens with most people with addiction issues who don't get help. You have one of three things happen. Well, four things. You either have severe legal consequences where you get locked up. You have institutions, psych wards and things like that. You have death, very prevalent. Or the fourth option, which doesn't get spoken much of because it's I think a negative slant on what we're dealing with, but there's recovery. And people don't talk about that enough. People don't talk about the success stories and stuff. It's always the number of overdoses and things like that. So I think it's important to know that recovery is possible. But for someone who can't stop doing what they're doing, recovery and this change of lifestyle seems like a far-fetched idea, even though they may know someone who's done that or things. So anyways, I got in a lot of trouble. I try to look like a Boy Scout, but I'm not.
You are now.
I am now. I try to be, but got in a lot of trouble, and through the criminal justice system, I was given an opportunity to get some help. And I got the help, and I found a group of people that I identified with, that walked, talked, and acted like me, and talked about used to having these same issues, but they didn't anymore, and they had this way of life that if I wanted to buy into it or participate in it, I could have that too. And I was kind of out of options at that point. We're talking about blowing major opportunities, not employable, no place to live, those type of things. So it was starting from scratch, even though I had that undergraduate degree and things like that, and people that really cared about me, but they just the help that I needed was beyond their capacity.
Okay.
And, not only just with the relationship, but financially, things like that, they just couldn't serve me anymore. And it was one of those things where I had to make a decision that, like, hey, I'm tired of living this way, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make the changes. So I got that opportunity, and I ran with it. I'd like to tell you that was my second chance. I'm grateful for 15th, 16th, 17th chances, because that's sometimes unfortunately what it takes for people to get it through their hard head that find themselves, they think they can control it, they think they can do things differently, they don't like people telling them what to do or how they should live their life, and it takes a surrender point, where it's like, I don't know what I'm doing here in life in general, so I'm gonna take some guidance from other people who said that they've been there before, and got that opportunity. I've had some menial work, and I struck out on my own. DVO, you remember when we were doing the landscape company?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have kids, and that's a blessing now. I was not in any position to be any kind of father figure to that. I mean, I couldn't even take care of myself, let alone kids or have a relationship and things like that. So that's one of the blessings of recovery, is I get to participate in other people's lives, and they count on me, and I can show up for them. I know the general public, looks at that stuff and it's like, well, that's what people are supposed to do, and that's right. That is right. But for someone like me, it was a big deal to be able to, pay my bills and have responsibility and accountability and things like that. So I had an opportunity. Things were going okay with the landscape company, but it wasn't quite giving me what I needed financially. So I had the opportunity to work in recovery. So I started off at Recovery Ways in a tech position where I was working with the clients. Kind of day in and day out, and then I got an opportunity to move up to where I was working more with the clients when they came in, things like that. And now I get the opportunity to work with families and clients and referring professionals for the actual admissions process and getting into a treatment program.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So you're saying back in the days when I gave you and Trent, rest in peace, that bottle of OxyContin, that was a bad idea.
Yeah, it was.
Well, I mean, we partied a lot together.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, just because we were all drinking and doing things. Statute of limitations, so I think we're okay. Talk about this. We had a good time.
Yep.
We had a good time, and so I didn't see that. Even in high school, we went to parties, same parties at houses, and everyone was kind of doing it, right? Everyone was doing it, and so I now know a lot of what happened. We had a heart-to-heart one time. I called you up to go out, and you basically straight up told me, I love you, man, but I need you not to invite me out anymore because it's too hard for you, right? Because we would go out. It'd be hard for you to say no to me, and then it'd be hard for you to say no to the drinks, or whatever else was happening.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how personal you want to get, but was there people say that you have to have that rock bottom, or maybe go into the mental capacity of an addict versus someone quote unquote normal?
Yeah, and that's the hard thing is, I can think of you and a handful of other people who, again, they acted just like I did, and they, used the same substances that I did, and their life didn't fall apart. So that was baffling. Like, why me? What?
Right.
Why is that? But it got so painful that I had to do something about it. And one of the tenets of recovery is, changing everything. You know? And so when you're given an opportunity to change, and this was before I had the treatment opportunity and things like that, I just was like, it's, I was kind of stuck in that frame of like, I don't want to be lonely. I don't want to just sit here on my mom's couch, but I also, I don't want to go out and do that stuff too. And again, what I didn't know at the time is there's recovery. right?
Yeah.
So there is a spot in the middle where I don't have to isolate and be depressed and hate my life, and I don't necessarily have to partake in the things that are causing me, pain and grief and harm and consequences. Because one of the things that I had to accept was you and me are built differently.
Okay.
Right? So some of the friends that I had that could take a drink or leave it alone, they didn't have the same effect that alcohol or drugs on them as it did on me.
Okay.
It kicked something off in me where I wanted more and more and more. I didn't care about the consequences. If you put those choices in front of me and said, but you're going to lose this, it's going to affect you this way, I'm going to do it anyways.
Okay.
And that's a little bit different than, some of the other people who were able to kind of maybe party hard or maybe have some issues because of it, but ultimately there was a sufficient reason while they were able to give it up or cut back on it kind of thing where they could use it more responsible. And I didn't have that stop, switch in me, right? So, it was difficult because I got sober at 29. I'm coming up on 37. So in November, I'm planning on celebrating 8 years of abstinent recovery.
Good job, buddy.
So, and that's from everything, that's not, well, I had a heroin problem, so I'm going to drink on the weekends. That's, that's nothing. That's complete abstinence. And, with that, I still have life that I have to deal with. I just have to deal with it in a different way, but I had to be shown that. And, prior to all that, it was a really difficult spot to be in where it's like I pretty much felt like I had to start over. And
well, you almost did.
I did. Yeah, I did. I mean, I had burned those opportunities up, and and it was not a anything personal with the people that cared about me or wanted to be around me. It's just I can't do certain things, and the world doesn't have to stop because of me. I walked through this world as a selfish individual and thought that everyone should, bow down or kowtow to my needs and things like that. So what I had to realize is I had to make the changes to be able to fit in this world, not try to make the world fit my needs.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, it's important.
Okay.
So.
And then, what was it that really? And if you tell me, if you don't want to or want to. What was it that maybe was your rock? Because they say sometimes you have to hit that rock bottom to say, okay, I need a change, I need a fix.
Yeah, and here's the cool thing about wanting to make the changes that we're talking about here today is everyone's rock bottom looks different.
Yeah.
Right. There's a spectrum of it.
Good point.
I know people that their rock bottom was going to prison for the 5th time.
Okay.
And they were facing a life charge in prison.
Wow.
I know people that didn't lose everything. They still had the spouse and the kids and the car and the job and things like that, but things were getting so unmanageable in their lives that they just needed to make a change. So there's two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And each person is different. It's when is enough, right?
Yeah.
So having that revelation of like, when is enough, but what am I going to do about it? Like, how willing am I to seek help or do things that are uncomfortable or maybe foreign to me? And that for me was, I had mentioned previously on this that I had gotten in trouble, and I got in a lot of trouble. So I was the one facing a life charge and things like that. And I'd gotten a golden opportunity to be on probation instead of go to prison.
Right.
So I was oversaw and things, and I just kept bumping my head. I just wasn't getting it. The difference was I wasn't willing to put in any effort. I wanted stuff to be handed to me, and that type of, again, selfish attitude that I want the blessings of this life that I foresee, but I'm not willing to do any work to get it. And that was a constant. If you look in hindsight too, that I want all the money in the world and all the safety and comfortability of what I want to do when I want to do it, but I'm not willing to work for it.
Yeah.
Right? Which I think pervades our society in some instances, but
I believe that
it was definitely on the forefront of how I perceive this world. So given that opportunity, I finally got to a point where I was going to jail over and over and over again through this. I was the opportunity I mentioned in probation was through the Salt Lake County Drug Court, and their aim is to help you change your life, and in return for that, your legal charges either get reduced or go away if you comply with their program. It's a long-term program. You're going to do things their way and on their terms, and I wasn't willing to do those at the time when I first agreed to it. So through manipulation and shortcuts and things like that, I just kept bumping my head, and their consequences in the drug court program is that you go to jail. That's, if they're going to make this deal with you, if you're not holding up your end of the bargain, you're going to go to jail. It's 2 days, 1 week, not long-term stints, but enough to make it, where it was unpleasant.
Yeah.
So around the 9th time, of trying to do things my way, I had this, I don't know why that time was different, because all the other times I had swore I didn't want to keep repeating this and doing that, but I think there was some divine intervention at that point. I have a belief system now that I didn't have before, that there's a greater good out there, and call it whatever you want. Call it God, call it higher power, call it spirit of the universe. There was some of that working in my life that I didn't necessarily see, but the rock bottom was where I kind of gave up trying to control everything. And I had an opportunity to go get help, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to get out of this, but I'm going to give out everything I got. And while there, I got introduced to the recovery community.
Okay.
So again, there were guys that I felt like were my buddies for a long time.
Okay.
And when you got vulnerable and talked about what you were struggling with or your history, they were like, yeah, me too. But this is what I did about it, right?
Okay.
So, in a mentorship fashion, they took steps. I'm part of a 12-step recovery program. I won't disclose which one due to traditions and things like that. But that's where I found my pseudo family, where I could go to these people, these men, and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. And they're like, yeah, me too. This is what I did. Or, yeah, that happened to me at this point in my recovery, but this is what I did about it. And it's really solution-based, right? So if I'm willing to, tap into that willingness of like, how far am I willing to go to make the changes? That's what, made the difference for me.
Okay.
Was, getting the help I needed for the issues that I felt were prevalent, that were, causing that. And that's one of the things that, going through treatment isn't for everyone, with substance abuse issues or mental health issues, but there's typically some form of treatment that's going to help really tap into those underlying issues. Right?
And if someone has a family member or friend that they feel needs something like this, what's the best way to find the best place for that person?
Yeah, sure. So, it's helpful to identify what they're struggling with and potentially how prevalent those underlying issues are. Because again, on mental health and how that affects someone's substance misuse or use, it can be very prevalent, or it can be, a symptom of the substance abuse, so it's important to understand that a lot of times that stuff needs to be treated simultaneously. So treatment centers are across the country. You have a plethora of them. There's different ways that you go about getting enrolled in one. For a family member or a loved one, this is the same advice I'd give to them, is identify the programs that you would feel clinically fit what your loved one is struggling with.
Okay.
So there's, websites, each, program has an admissions department or admissions person that you can talk with about the offerings of the program. Again, treatment centers kind of have a different focus. There's evidence-based modalities that most of them use. Some take it, very far and offer a lot of services. Some are, really bare bones, and they just try to do that. There's just a lot of different ways to go about this. So identifying what program fits your loved one's clinical needs is important, and asking those questions. If a therapist is involved in their treatment, how often do they get to see them? If a psychiatrist is, how prevalent is it? Like, what other things do you do to really tackle those underlying issues? So once you've identified a clinical sound program, the other thing that a lot of people run into is, how do they fund it, right?
Okay.
Treatment has to be funded somehow.
Sure.
So there's a few different ways. A lot of people have health insurance. And it's been expanded because of what's called to the mental health parity law, where in 2008, Congress passed a law that they had to treat mental health and substance abuse on par with medical conditions.
Interesting.
So they couldn't treat it separately. Now there's some exclusions and things like that, but most people who have a run-of-the-mill employer-sponsored insurance policy have substance abuse benefits, and that covers medical detox. That can cover in most instances residential treatment or outpatient treatment, right? So there's a whole step down or choices, if you will. So how do you fund it? Most of the treatment centers can look at a particular individual policy when they call in, and they say, this is what's covered, this isn't what's covered, this is your obligation, this is what we anticipate the insurance picking up. So there's that. And then for the people that are blessed enough to be able to fund that privately, that's an option as well too, where insurance creates issues, just like with medical situations and things like that. Sometimes people have the opportunity to pay out of pocket where they don't want that. And you have all kinds of ends of the spectrum, from low cost all the way up to, stuff that you see on commercials that are a lavish, beachfront respite.
I've seen some of those on TV shows.
I think it's important too for a good majority of the population. Especially in Salt Lake, it really depends on where you're viewing this and what kind of services are in your area, but there's typically free services too. So there's a lot of the population that doesn't fit into that category of having insurance or having funds to pay for treatment, so they have to seek that out. But that's typically funded through state programs, Medicaid, things like that, where they have to go about it a different way. So help's out there, it just looks a little bit differently, and it may be a little bit slower of a process in getting someone enrolled, but there's always help available.
Speaking of the Salt Lake area and maybe Utah as a whole, isn't it ranked one of the highest in opioid addiction?
It does, and I think that's a cultural thing here. I think people look at prescriptions different than they do, illicit substances. I look at my pain medication different than I look at heroin, right?
Yes.
But if you look at the basis of it, they act on the body very similarly. But because one is prescribed from a doctor, a medical professional, and I may be taking it because I have legitimate pain, Now couple that with some of those underlying issues, and it can snowball into something that you don't do. But I think it's a cultural thing. I think it's prevalent that it's becoming less taboo to talk about that.
It really is, especially with this upcoming election.
Yeah, there's just
definitely has.
It's gotten to a point where it's not a subject that people can avoid anymore. And two, you have things, but I think culturally, and again, this is just across the country, is addiction brings shame and guilt. No one sets out to be an addict or an alcoholic. They don't set out to have mental health issues. So when that's prevalent in their life, no one really wants to get honest about that and say, like, hey, I'm struggling with this stuff. One, because they don't know what to do about it, or two, the family dynamic may be that, well, you should just stop doing that, or pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and so there's some miseducation or misunderstanding of what that looks like. And it is prevalent here. It's prevalent all over the country. The program that I work with, we take people that travel from all over the country for our services. So, it's prevalent elsewhere too. And the help is catching up. It's still not up to par. It's still not accessible to everyone who needs it. So we got some work to do. But it's a big deal everywhere. When you look at the totality of everything, alcohol is a legal substance, but it causes more issues than some of the illicit substances. It's just, culturally, that's where we've been. But if you combine alcohol, prescription drug issues, illicit drug issues, it's a big deal, because even if you don't care about that issue in and of itself, it affects insurance, it affects medical.
That's a good point.
The federal government and where they have to generate resources and things. So it does affect everyone.
It's that ripple effect then.
Correct.
That's a good point. So it is less taboo now, especially with Prop 2 coming into Utah on the ballots, where people can vote on it. I've seen messages where people, they attack the doctors for prescribing opioids. And then as people, because the addiction that's there with that, but then it's hard to maybe get scripts, or it's hard to get a hold of it, or maybe it gets expensive. So like you were mentioning, they get on that path towards heroin because it's that same feeling, but cheaper.
Yeah, correct.
Is that right?
Yeah. And, through normal channels, there's checks and balances, So typically when people get a dependency, just their regular prescription isn't enough. So they're
that's a good point too.
They're doctor shopping. They're buying it from their friends or their neighbors,
Yeah.
or the person that they met at the bar, or whatever the case is, and that in and of itself becomes enough or not enough. And with that, it gets expensive. A drug addiction is a very expensive job and to do to stay medicated, and people switch to that cheaper alternative, and just all sorts of chaos follows and ensues from there.
Let me ask you, how much do you think you were spending, maybe a week or a day or a month on it?
Hundreds of dollars a day.
Wow.
So calculate that up over a week.
Yeah.
It's a retirement. It's a home. It's
sure.
And
you weren't making that a day or a week.
No. So the way people fund that is, they borrow, beg, and steal.
Yeah.
And so one of the things where I think it's important to talk about on this podcast is, we see in the news, people getting in trouble for all kinds of things, and a lot of it is tied back to substance abuse. Not in every case.
Sure.
And so we need to look at that and be wary of that. Now, I'm a big proponent of there's consequences and accountability for poor choices, but a lot of times people are doing that, because they're seeking out that money for the fix and things like that. Again, not discounting the harm that they're causing and things like that, but let's get to the root issue and deal with it before it gets to that.
Good point.
So,
if they want to reach out to Recovery Ways, what's the best way for someone to do that?
Yeah, so we have a website. We're located in Murray. We have a few different facilities that we serve for those different populations and, and different levels of care that I mentioned. They can go to the Recovery Ways website. It's waysrecoveryways.com.
Okay.
And there's an admissions number. There's an option for that. Be careful when you're searching on the internet. Make sure you're talking with the program itself. I was sharing with DVO, before this podcast started, that there's an underbelly of the addiction recovery treatment industry.
About that.
And we're not seeing it so prevalent in Utah, but people may be aware of Southern California and Florida that people look at treatment as a way to really tap into the insurance companies. So they're being unscrupulous and doing things. So when you're calling for yourself or a loved one, make sure you're talking with the treatment center that is actually going to be treating you. Make sure you're not calling a call center that's going to sell your case to the highest treatment center bidder.
Gotcha.
Things like that. Make sure that there's accreditations and licensure within the state and that they're doing, and that all the professionals that are treating you are above par.
Okay. Yeah. What are some of the other things that you were mentioning that they're doing in this?
So I've heard of some really nefarious stuff where, and again, it's not prevalent in Utah, but it can make its way here. But in some of the larger states where treatment, is something that you could trip over walking from one block to another, they're doing things like paying people to relapse so they can then, tap into their insurance over and over again.
Wow.
Things like that. Seeking people out at 12-step meetings, because that's a way to go. Signing them
almost like vultures, right? Waiting for them to come out.
Signing them up for insurance policies and paying their premium just so they can then bill the insurance provider for that. So again, not super prevalent here, but it can come up. So just make sure you're doing your due diligence. Ask the tough questions, and if you don't feel like a program is answering those, you may want to open up your options, because there are a lot of options. Treatment is very prevalent in Utah and elsewhere. So DJ, what is recovery like for you today? You've got a family, you've got kids.
Talk about that. Like, how is it a struggle? Is it a struggle every day?
No.
Okay.
And so that was the hard thing, is when I was first, going through this process, I thought, once I got sober, life was over. No more fun. I had to just sit there and look at a wall and just shake and I can't use.
Because that was your life, right? It was taking substance. It was partying. It was having a good time.
And that was my life for a while too. Even post that way, is that I didn't want to do recovery, but I didn't want to use anymore. So I was just staring at the wall. And the hard thing is that wins out. The addiction won out every time. So, my perception and perspective of what life was going to look like post treatment and post recovery is completely turned on its head, right? So the things that I value, the things that I've had to learn through the recovery program that I work is, there's principles associated with it. There are things that I have to subscribe to, and what it looks like for me today is I don't wake up thinking about, when I'm going to get high, or who am I going to screw over to get the money that I need to get. It's actually it's not even on the forefront of my mind, and that I can't describe it other than it was something else bigger working in my life, because I tried so hard that just wishing it away or hoping it goes away, it didn't do that. So recovery looks like me going to work every day.
All right.
Again, we're talking about normal people stuff here, right? So, going to work, having good relationships, right? Having and being present for those relationships. Things that I used to look at as, cutting into my my
That's
time.
a good point.
And things
Wow.
like that.
Okay.
I'm being cognizant of that, and how important relationships are to me, because they could be taken away, very quickly. Addiction is a deadly progressive illness that, if not treated, is not going to get better. And recovery to me looks like helping other people. So part of what I do is that, and reaching my hand out when it's going to affect someone. I don't like to talk about my recovery and things like that unless it's going to help someone. I think it's important, because no one cares that you're sober, honestly.
Sure.
I mean, people, it's like, 80% of the world does that too. So, who cares, right? But I think it's important for the people that are struggling to get the message out there, to get information out there that if you fit into this category, there's hope for you too. So it's real hope-based, and then just, looking about what I can put back in the world versus, me. So
Good,
it's less self.
It's a good way to look at it, brother.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, man, I'm glad you're doing well.
Thanks, Steve.
You got your family going.
Yep.
Work's going great for you. Thanks for giving me your time and talking with us. And if you guys know someone that could use help, reach out. recoveryways.com is where DJ's at. And you also kind of share your story with people that come in too. I remember you telling me that.
A little bit. I mean, I think it's important for them to connect with someone who's been there before, especially when you're talking to the individual. And we meet people where they're at. Now, one of the cool things about Recovery Ways is we can't be everything to everyone, right? So we can't treat everybody, but anyone who calls us is going to get that appropriate referral, right?
Okay,
so
nice.
We work with different providers all over within the state, within the country, within the county, to make that appropriate recommendation given financial obstacles, clinical obstacles. You can't be everything to everyone. So if we're not a good fit for a person because of those reasons, we're going to make sure that they get the information of where they can go next, because it's important that they get help.
That's good. And that's how you share your story with people, that if it's going to benefit them. 'Cause I like how you put that. It's who cares? It's almost like a joke that if you're a vegan or you're in CrossFit, everyone knows, right? Because you want to tell everyone about it, but you don't, right?
And that's prevalent in recovery too. I think there's a time and a place, and but I think it has become more prevalent, or at least talked about more. And I think people need to know that there's help out there.
That's
and
good.
The change is important, because again, we hear so many statistics, and they're astounding, of how many people pass away due to drug addiction and mental health issues all over, and it's not a disease, and I subscribe to it, that it's a disease that just affects one part of the population. We're talking about rich, poor, black, white,
right.
This side of the country, that side of the country. Everyone knows someone or has dealt with it themselves.
Yeah.
And so the more we talk about it, the more information gets out about what to do next.
Well, awesome, man. Congratulations on 8 years, you said, coming up?
Yeah.
Congratulations on 8 years and 80 more, buddy.
Yeah.
Love you, brother. Thanks, man.
Love you too, man.
Take care.